Morning, everyone. Hi, Martin.
Morning, all.
Hey, hey, hey.
Morning.
Afternoon.
Hi, Neil. Nice to see you on.
Hi, morning all, morning then. Yeah, thanks. I'm just dropping the kids. So I'll be on shortly. Yeah.
Morning.
How many UK people have you got coming to Anaheim?
The number's a little bit low this year, Sarah. We're about 50, something like that.
Oh, 50.
Yeah.
We're really low. I think we had like about 33 go to Miami. I think we're only sitting at about 13 to 15. Like quite low. So
Yeah. There are people going to Australia to global, so I think that's part of the reason.
oh yeah, gotcha.
Well done in your role, Martin, for the foundation.
Say again, sorry, Jack.
I said, well done on taking up the role in the foundation.
Thank you. Thank you. Every little helps.
Morning.
Meeting is being recorded.
Just give it a few minutes longer. Got more people coming into the room.
Morning.
Morning, Craig.
Less than 2 weeks to go, everyone. Is it less than 2 weeks? Nearly 2 weeks? Well, depending on when you're flying.
About that, yep.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Right, let's get going then, because I want to be able to finish this promptly. For those not on the call, I will email them later with a recording. So shame you're not here. Would have been great if you were. Maybe next time. So for this month, we have two speakers talking about two very different subjects. One of them is a bit of a mystery to me, but I'm sure that's going to be revealed shortly. And our second speaker is going to talk about smart cash from Insignis, as that's an important part of our financial planning piece for clients. However, our first speaker is our very own Matt Smith of Buckingham Wealth. I hope I've described that correctly. And Matt is going to talk about the eighth wonder of the world, which he calls database marketing. So over to you, Matt. The floor is yours for the next 25-30 minutes.
Very good. Thank you, Martin. Do you want me to leave a bit of time for Q&A at the end?
Can do.
Okay, yeah, let's go with that, shall we? So let me just, I'll just send a sharing request here. Hopefully you can turn me on for a screen share. There we go. Lovely.
Matt, you've never finished on time yet. I can't believe you've just been bold enough to suggest you might leave time for questions and answers.
Well, I'll do my best. Here we go. I've kept it quite brief, but yeah, that's famous last words, isn't it? So here we go. Right, let me press the go button on the presentation. There we are. Can everybody see that okay? Just a thumbs up or something would be useful. Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, you know, as Martin said, it's really difficult to do justice to a subject like this in sort of 20 minutes. So in essence, this is a very, very sort of high level overview of our marketing journey, and just trying to make the case really as to why you might want to consider database marketing as, you know, one pillar or even the only pillar of your marketing strategy. And I've sort of equated it to compound interest, which of course has been described as the eighth wonder of the world. So I'm going to try and give you a bit of an overview of our journey, some of the lessons and things that we've picked up along the way, and also just give you a starting point. You know, this is a distillation of a 10-year plus process, but just to give you somewhere to start if you want to sort of explore database marketing in your own practice. So I do have some learning objectives, which my friend Mr. Gemini put together for me. I won't dwell on these in huge detail, but for CPD purposes, we have some learning objectives there. So Buckingham Gate, we started back in 2013. So we've just celebrated our 13th birthday, which is my lucky number, incidentally. But the whole business sort of stemmed from a near-death experience. You know, some of you would have heard me talk about this before, and I won't go through the whole story because it is a long story. But I nearly died on my honeymoon. So, of course, you know, you say in sickness and in health, I don't think you're meant to kind of put that vow to the test only 4 or 5 days later, but I decided that would be a good idea. So I ended up in hospital on my honeymoon after a serious allergic reaction. Spent 3 weeks in hospital in the United States, and the first 2 of those weeks were sort of pretty touch and go. Wasn't, you know, really sure if I was going to pull through. I ended up being essentially accompanied home by a nurse. We were kind of repatriated by the insurance company, transferred home, and then spent another sort of 4 to 6 weeks at home, just recovering from the whole ordeal. And, you know, during that time, you sort of reflect on, you know, reflect on life, reflect on business. And up until that point, I'd always wanted, you know, my own business, wanted to do something for myself. And you go through an experience like that and you just think, what am I waiting for? You know, what on earth am I so scared of, really? And it puts things into perspective. So we kicked off our journey in 2013. But of course, you know, the big question, I think, for any new financial planning business is where the heck do the clients come from? And, you know, in a sense, that was my biggest fear is, you know, you spend all this time, energy, money, creating a brand, creating a service proposition. You open the doors to your new venture and it's just tumbleweed. And of course, you know, without a marketing strategy, without existing clients, which we didn't really have at the time, you risk that very fate. You know, you open the doors having invested huge volumes of time, energy, money, and nobody comes essentially. Now, fortuitously, in the run up to me starting the business, I was introduced to my co-founder and co-director, Cabell, and his entire background is in digital marketing. So from the very start, Buckingham Gate has been a digital marketing led firm. You know, in a sense, that was the nucleus of the idea behind the business, is we could take, you know, some of the real expertise that Cab had in the digital marketing space. And Cab had spent, you know, many years marketing almost exclusively with financial services firms. And we could use that to build a financial planning business. But, you know, when we started, of course, you know, you always start with great ambitions and you think it's going to be straightforward, but we all know it's anything but. So we didn't really know what we'd signed up for. And I think with digital marketing especially, but I think this is probably true of most marketing strategies, it only becomes clear how powerful it is, you know, many years later. And in the early years, you feel like you're sort of shouting into a vacuum. You feel like your efforts are in vain. And so I've always equated digital marketing to compound interest. You know, we're probably all familiar with this quote, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. I believe this quote is often attributed to Einstein, although having done a bit of research, I don't think there's actually any evidence that Einstein indeed said these words. So we're not quite sure where it comes from, but I think that the message rings true nonetheless. And I think the beauty about potentially starting a digital marketing strategy today is that with the power of AI, a lot of this is much easier than it's ever been before. It's easier to create content, and also it's easier to optimize your content and your messaging. You know, you can essentially ask your ChatGPT, your Claude, your Gemini to be your very highly paid, you know, digital marketing and conversion expert, and it can shortcut a lot of this journey for you. And you know, on that basis, I thought, you know, who better to ask to prepare for the presentation than AI? So I asked AI, you know, can you explain to me the benefits of database marketing rather than other forms of digital marketing or other forms of renting data? And I think this slide, you know, sums up AI perfectly, really, in that it got it about 95% right. You know, had I put this slide together, I probably would have said pretty much the same thing. But note there are a few just bizarre, you know, typos and spelling mistakes and things in here, which I thought I'd include for demonstration purposes, because as with everything AI, you know, you do still need the human touch. You need that sense check, that critical evaluation to make sure it's doing what you want it to do. Now, I think the issue with a lot of marketing strategies is you are, in a sense, renting the data. And what I mean by that is you're continually paying to access that data. And you know, a lot of these things come from experience. You know, we've tried and experimented with lots of other strategies before. So of course you can go to businesses who will data mine for you. And again, we've got some MDRT members that have been very successful with that strategy. You know, they will pay a data mining company to find a particular demographic, whether that's based on wealth, geographical area, whether that's based on the client's profession or job role, perhaps. And they will essentially rent a pool of data that they can then communicate with. And that could be via email, that could be via, you know, physical mail shots going through the letterbox. And very often those firms will be inviting clients to seminar, webinar style events, which again, we are a huge advocate of. But the problem with that approach is that you're always paying money, essentially. You know, you are renting the data, it's not your data. And every time you want to communicate with that client base, you're having to pay again. So, you know, you may have communicated with the same people 12 months ago, but if you want to send them either the same message, just again, or you want to send them a different message. And I think, you know, this is proving hugely pertinent at the moment with the pension legislation changes we've got coming next year. And we're really seeing the value of the database. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, just how phenomenal the database has been as we start to talk about these pension changes. But if you wanted to do that with rented data, again, you need to write another check, essentially. You've got to pay again to speak to those same people. The other issue with rented data is because you don't own it, you can't often manipulate it. So that the challenge with renting data is you get, you know, one pool of data based on a certain set of criteria, but you can't necessarily then manipulate or manage that data if you want to repurpose it to do something else, or perhaps you want to segment it and do something different with that same client pool. So in my view, owning your database is the much better approach. And again, this is very much like an investment. You put some money in the first instance, you add people to your own database, but once you've got them on there, they're your data. You can speak to those people and communicate with them time and time again. So not only does the database grow over time, but also the value of it grows over time as well, because you continually then communicate with that potential prospect or client pool. You build trust, you build, in a sense, you build digital relationships with people. They become familiar with your brand. And you can then communicate with them about other things. And again, this brings us on to the pension changes, because we are having just the most phenomenal response to some of our initial pension mailings. We've just started to run. In fact, I'm presenting a couple of workshops later today. And because of the database we've now built, we're selling out these workshops in about an hour. So we've got 20 people per workshop paying to attend to hear us talk about the pension changes, what to do about it. And as I say, we're selling those out within about an hour because we've built this database over time. And I think, that the database potentially, for anybody that's looking to scale or potentially sell a firm in the future, what a huge asset to put on your kind of pitch book to say, not only do we have this wonderful business, we've got these strong client relationships, we've got a recurring revenue stream, but we've also got our own database, that we can communicate with. So actually, we've solved the organic growth problem. And also, I think, owning the data potentially is a great thing from a regulatory point of view as well. We can segment the data, we can send specific messages to specific blocks of the database. So, for example, with the pension changes, we have a fairly good idea who on the database has a pension and a rough idea of what their estate value might be. So we can target our inheritance tax messages around that very specifically, which of course, fits in line beautifully with consumer duty, making information clear, fair, not misleading, all the lovely things that the regulator wants us to do as well. But yeah, as I say, AI is not perfect. I think it did a really good job here. And again, this is a great example, quoting Dan Sullivan and the 80% approach. I think AI is brilliant to do the first 80% for you. So it can really shortcut a lot of these things. But do note that X spent resets every time and cost equals O seat frequency. So there you go. That's Gemini's view of digital marketing. So it does make mistakes. Just be aware of that. So this is the result that we've achieved, and I'll talk in just a moment about how you can potentially sort of replicate this same journey. So note that the scale at the bottom is not totally linear. So I start the journey at January 2014. And it quickly skips, you'll see at the bottom there, to January of 2023. But note how the numbers are changing. So very much like investing, this is like a client paying their regular monthly contribution into a pension. It feels pretty insignificant when you first get started. So you'll be paying money to advertise and start adding names to your database. And of course, at the end of month one, you might have 20 people or 50 people, which as an online database is probably not going to achieve massively dramatic results. But like all investments, it starts to compound and grow over time. And you can see, how the database has moved. But even if you just look, for example, about a third of the way across April 2024, we were at about 38,000 names on the database. So it took us essentially 10 years to get to that point. It took us 10 years to get to 38,000. And then by April of this year, we were at 75,000. So, we've almost doubled in that final 2 years. So we are now really seeing the benefit of that exponential growth curve with digital marketing. And all of our marketing strategy, in essence, pretty well everything we do is with the intention of getting somebody into an event of some description. We want to bring them into either a webinar or a workshop or a seminar style event. We think that's absolutely the best window into our world. And these are some of the numbers that we're now achieving. And again, this is a 12, 13-year journey. But as of December, the database was circa 74,000. That now means we're seeing around 700 people per month attend our webinar sessions, which is translating into 130, 140 odd new meeting requests. Now, do we book every single one of those meetings? No, we don't. Those are meeting requests, but we will typically book maybe 50 or 60% of those prospects in for new discovery meetings. So on a good month now, the database is generating maybe 60, 65 new meeting requests. So that's just a bit of background on our journey. But how do you get started? Because of course, this is quite a big subject, and it can be a bit intimidating. But I think, as I say, again, with AI, it's so much easier now to get started. And digital marketing really all just starts with a piece of content. Now, we've always used guides essentially as our main content item. And although I've spent many, many hours writing many, many guides over the years, the very first guide I ever wrote when I started the business, which is the one on the left-hand side, the Essential Guide to Inheritance Tax, that has always been and remains to this day our most popular and most cost-effective content item. So I've probably spent hours and hours and thousands of pounds producing another 10 or 12 guides as the years have gone on, in a sense, trying to reinvent the wheel, when actually the first version still seems to be the most popular. And I think that's one of the beauties with digital marketing is the data tells you the story. You don't need to second guess. If the data's leading you one way, you just double down on that path. So these are sort of 10 to 12 page PDF guides on a particular subject matter. Now, our expertise and what we try to be known for in the market is estate planning, inheritance tax mitigation, and sort of intergenerational family planning. So pretty much all of our content now is in that direction. That's sort of how we present ourselves to the world, and that's how prospects and clients come to find us. And once you've produced your content item, now, it could be a PDF guide. Nowadays, it could be anything. It could be a podcast. Again, we know some very high profile planners have been incredibly successful with podcast content. Could be video content. You could start up a YouTube channel or another video channel. Could be some sort of case study, presentation, interview. Any piece of content essentially can form the basis for your digital marketing. But having created that content, what we've always done essentially is paid for exposure. So this is the process that we go through, and hopefully, if this is of interest, you can start to just get a view as to the client journey when we're starting with digital marketing. So having produced that content item, we then pay for exposure. So, we are just paying to advertise online. And, you might see the Buckingham Gate Guide to Inheritance Tax. That might pop up on the Sunday Times website. It might pop up on the London Stock Exchange website. And it's just like any other, online ad. It's click here to download the guide. And then they give us their email address. And that's the start of the journey, essentially, so that the client or the prospect will click to say, yes, please, I would love to have your guide to inheritance tax planning. In return, they give us their email address. We send them onto a landing page, we capture their email, and then the data goes into our own marketing system. So we use MailChimp for this purpose, which is just an online sort of email management platform. But there are 2 or 3 other big players in this market. But MailChimp, I think, is probably the one that more people than often are familiar with. And in my view, it's it's very straightforward and very simple to use. So you don't need to be a digital expert or a coding expert to use MailChimp. It's pretty straightforward now to put together a marketing email. And once again, like everything nowadays, there's AI tools built into the platform which make life a bit easier when you're putting together marketing messages. Now, as I'll discuss in just one moment, we have tried everything to shortcut this process. We've essentially tried every different combination, and we've settled every single time that you have to take people through this 9-step journey. So having put people into our database, we now own the data, so that email list is ours, and we can talk to those people to our heart's content. But almost everything we send people is an invite to an event of some description. So rather than telling them in a marketing email about the pension changes, we will say, come to our workshop about the pension changes, or come to our webinar session about the pension changes. We want the opportunity to talk to these prospects. So probably 90% of the emails we send to the database are an invite to an event of some description. And probably 90% of that 90% is exactly the same email, would you believe? We've sent the database pretty much the same webinar invite email for the last 3 or 4 years, every month. And you'd think people get tired or they lose interest, but we have a remarkably low unsubscriber rate, because I think it's one of those subject matters that people just put in the back pocket. I'll just save that for later. I'll just, I might need that one day. So I'll keep getting that email. And one day the time might be right. People will have a life event, a trigger event, where they think, yeah, now's the time for me to start talking to Buckingham Gate about my estate planning. So once we've gone through the event, and again, that could be in person, that could be a physical, workshop or seminar style event. But more often than not now, we do webinar style approach. We just use Zoom, the webinar tool on Zoom. So it's very much like we're doing today, just a one-to-many presentation on Zoom. And then on the back of that, we give the prospects the opportunity to request a discovery meeting with us. And that's sort of how we begin the client journey. But the beauty of that approach is, when a prospect lands in the meeting room with one of our advisors, they're really, I think, about as warm as a prospect can be. That they've requested our content item. One assumes they've read the content item and enjoyed that content. They've attended our webinar or a workshop event. We've spoken about who we are, what we do, who we do it for, and how much it costs. And we then charge clients for the first meeting. So again, we get really warm, really highly engaged prospects when they first land in the meeting room. And of course, hopefully, we then generate some business on the back of it. Now, as I've mentioned, we've tried to shortcut this process so many times over the years. You try to get clever with it. So having developed what is a really successful process, you then try and break it. And we've done all sorts of iterations as the years have gone on. But we've kind of determined that you have to do these 9 steps. This is sort of the bare minimum as a digital marketing journey from our point of view. So when we first started, we didn't have the whole webinar journey. So we'd do an online ad, people would download the guide, and then we'd ask them, would you like a meeting with us? We tried to shortcut the whole of the middle of the process and just say, here's our content item, would you like a meeting? And remarkably, a load of people said, yes, I'd love a meeting. So when we first did this, we thought, wow, we've cracked the Da Vinci Code here. But then we'd phone 100 people that had said, yes, I want a meeting. And frankly, 98 of them, they barely knew who we were, let alone actually wanted a meeting. So it ended up being really high effort and really low reward. So when that didn't work, we thought, well, what's a really good idea? Let's remove another step from the process. So we just did an online ad saying, do you want a meeting? And that performs horribly, very, very expensive. You spend a huge amount of money and you achieve almost no results at all. So we then thought, well, let's do the ad, but invite people through the ad to attend the webinar. So you're paying for exposure to your webinar invite. And again, that doesn't work because people will click the button. So you end up spending a heck of a lot of money on clicks, but then, maybe people can't make your date or can't make the time. So that doesn't work either. And then we tried skipping the content item. Some of these things seem really stupid when I look back and think what we did. But I thought, well, why don't we just ask people if they want to be on our mailing list? Just give us your email for nothing. Give us your email for free. And again, unsurprisingly, that didn't work. And then finally, we have tried a variation where we didn't have the online ad. We just built our content, build it and they will come. And, I published it on my LinkedIn page and put it on Facebook and things, but you're not likely to get huge numbers if you follow that strategy. So we come back to that same 9-step journey. But if you want to get started with this, all you need to do is produce a content item. Now, most of us will have something that we've got already. Most of us will have, blogs, guides, websites, videos, podcasts, whatever it might be. And again, using AI now, it's really easy, really fast to repurpose that into a piece of content that's suitable for the online space. So it's really easy to get started. And you can either kind of learn and research digital marketing yourself, or there's loads of people that will help you with this. You know, we've used Phil Bray at the Yardstick Agency for many, many years now. He helps us with some of our kind of the techie bit of the digital marketing funnel, and there are other experts you can speak to as well. So as with everything in life, you can either do it yourself, you can research, or you can just find an expert who can get exposure to your content. So just a couple of considerations if this is something you wish to explore. I think, like all marketing systems, just consistency and commitment are absolutely key. And I think this is true of all marketing strategies. You know, that there are probably 10 different marketing approaches you can take in the financial planning space. Some of us are incredibly successful with professional connections, you know, solicitors, accountants. Some of us have fantastic referral networks from clients or other introducers. Some people have fantastic profiles on, you know, Unbiased, Vouched For, and the directory websites. Some people like us have really gone hard into this digital space. But I think whatever you do, you need to commit to it. You need to stay in the lane. And again, like investing, like compound interest, you've got to be prepared for pretty minuscule results in the early few years. You know, you have to kind of have the commitment to push through those early years when it feels like it's not working. With digital marketing, especially, you almost intend to waste a bit of money. You have to waste money to find out what doesn't work, and then you find out what does. So just be prepared for that. Start small, and then think about building big. And yeah, just accept, you know, the snowball takes a bit of time to grow, but from very small digital database acorns have now grown a big oak tree. So this has been a fantastic marketing journey for us. And of course, you know, it sounds so straightforward, doesn't it, when you distill 12 or 13 years worth of blood, sweat and tears. And yeah, frankly, a vast amount of wasted money as well. But it has now generated the results, and like all investments, we're now starting to see those returns. So yeah, thank you very much. Hopefully that's been useful, and there's a few tidbits that you can take away if you want to sort of research your own marketing journey.
Thank you, Matt. Many ways to build a business, and it looks like you're doing a great job there. I've got one question for you, and that is around what's happening with pension taxation from April next year. Will you be writing your own guide on the subject? And a second part of the question is, do you continually rewrite these downloads to bring them more up to date? Or are they pretty much static from when you first wrote them?
Right. No, so to answer the first part of the question, I mean, yeah, when we see that the pension change, I mean, to be honest, in my mind, this is the biggest opportunity we've had probably since 2015 and pension freedom. So yeah, absolutely, we will be speaking to this subject specifically. And yes, we will have a guide. Incidentally, I was just waiting for the Solidus webinar, which was yesterday, to launch their new pension trust solution. And you know, part of that will then feed into new guides and new content items. So yes, we will be shouting this from the rooftops, to be frank. So I just think it's just phenomenal opportunity. And there's huge uncertainty. You know, the whole thing is so much more nuanced and so much more complex, and people just need help and assistance with this moving forward. And yeah, you know, we do tweak and update the guides as time goes on, but yeah, typically that's only in response to, you know, legislation changes and things. So, you know, if I take that original, the essential guide to IHT, which was our very first content item, probably 70% of that is still exactly the same text that we had on day one. But of course, you know, we've changed things and tweaked as the legislation has moved over time.
Okay, thank you. Kevin is asking a question, and I know you've got quite a few advisors in your practice, but what roughly, if you're willing to share with us, are you spending on advertising and marketing to build that really significant database that you've now got? Mm-hmm. How much are you spending every month doing that?
Yeah, so I mean, present day, we probably spend between about £5,000 and £15,000 a month on digital ad exposure. And the digital marketing world is incredibly fickle. So the cost per lead will vary quite dramatically. And that depends on all sorts of different factors. But a big part of that is actually that there is kind of an annual budget cycle that a lot of the big players go through. And, very much like the, local councils and things, their budget for next year will be based on what they've spent this year. So you find there are certain pinch points where actually some of the big fish in the fishers, the SJPs of this world, they're looking to spend a lot of money very quickly because they want to spend this year's budget before they roll over next year. Or conversely, sometimes they've got overexcited and they've spent too much. So they'll turn off their campaigns, and you find then there's much less competition out there on the network. So we spend more when the cost is lower. In a sense, we try to take advantage when the leads are on sale. But again, we've not spent that much always. When we first started, we were probably spending maybe something between £500 and £1,500 a month is where we started. Again, that whole investment philosophy. But of course, as the database grows, it starts to generate more revenue for you at the bottom end of your funnel. And then part of that revenue you reinvest back into the top of the funnel to then grow the database further in the following years.
It sounds to me, Matt, that you've been reading Russell Brunson's books. If you don't know who's on the call, Russell Brunson plows all his money back in that he makes back into the campaigns until he gets to the point where he's making less money than he's putting into ads. So for those in the room that think £15,000 is a lot of money to spend on ads, if you're making 50 a month, it's a different story. One more question from me. Do you have a favoured platform for advertising?
It really does vary, and without wanting to dodge the question, online marketing is just explosively fickle. So you'd be amazed, like the subtle changes that really can either make or break a campaign. As I say, a lot of it's about competition. So it's who am I trying to outbid? If I want to appear on the Sunday Times, ad box, who have I got to outbid to be there? And that changes literally from day to day. So sometimes the Sunday Times is going to be the best place that you've ever seen, and the following day you might have to spend 10 times what you were spending the day before to achieve the same exposure. So it really does vary, but we try to find places where our people, our kind of demographic will hang out. So we really love things like Sunday Times, Sunday Telegraph. That works really well for us. The Apple News business pages, again, have been really successful. So we're looking for people that, are generally fairly wealthy, of course, and people who are already taking an interest in their own, sort of financial or estate planning, so people who are kind of already engaged to a certain extent.
Sorry, I keep coming up with more questions here because it's a fascinating subject for me, marketing. So do you employ an outsourced ads manager to run your ads campaigns to keep that cost per click down?
We do bits of both. So my co-director Cab, and again, this is not my expertise, this is very much his domain. So he manages a part of our ad spend directly. So it's actually Cab, logging in, clicking the buttons, etc. But part of it we use Yardstick, so that they manage all of our Facebook campaigns, because Facebook as a subject matter is kind of a niche all on its own. Facebook is a total enigma to me, whereas the Yardstick team seem to have that pretty down pat. So Yardstick will do the kind of ad management, bid management and things like that for us. So it's a combination of both.
Okay, last question from me on this subject, I promise. If you could give us all just one little tip. I know you've covered quite a lot of stuff there. If you could give us one takeaway for a seed of thought, because I doubt whether any of us are going to implement this before 10 this morning. To get started, what would be the first thing that you would say to any of us? This is what I'd do first.
I think, if I was starting the journey again today, I would go to, my preferred AI tool, and I would ask it to scrape my website and, throw in any other content I had, and, say to the AI, can you produce me a 12-page PDF guide which is optimized for digital ad conversion? Something to that effect, and just see where it starts you. Clearly don't copy and paste that and start publishing it to the world. There's going to be some tweaks and nuance. But I think, again, the 80% approach, I think that's going to get you a good way to getting started, and it breaks down a lot of the barriers to kind of getting going in this space.
That's brilliant, Matt. Thank you. Anybody else got any questions? Because I'm hogging the limelight here a little bit. Nope, nope. Okay. Moving on. Insignis. We can't track down our Insignis speaker. If you are here, please raise your hand and unmute yourself. If not, Chris and I are going to do a version of this presentation. All I can say is if they haven't turned up, there are other cash hub providers in the marketplace. So it's not just Insignis, there's Flagstone, Quilter have a cash hub, and I'm sure some of the other platforms also have a cash hub. So Chris has loaded up a presentation about Insignis. I don't know Insignis personally because I'm using a different cache hub. Tell me about it, what you know about Insignis, Chris, and clearly because you've got the slides, you're using it. What does it do that another cache hub possibly doesn't do?
Cool. Morning, everybody. Hi, and thanks, Martin. Yeah, I've just thought I'd grab up their website, and I thought I'd show you what they can do in some of their things with their calculator. They look after cash and they call it Smart Cash. And this is where you can deposit more than the 120,000 FSCS limit and have it all protected because they spread the cash across different institutions without multiple applications, without extra paperwork. And if you choose a account that is, say, 3 months or 6 months notice, around a week or two before that end fixed period is due to expire, it will give you a prompt and also suggest the next best account and make it easy for you to switch from the current 3 month account that you may have to the next one at just a few clicks of a button. And that with that, we can have easy, seamless management, and just to make sure we're getting the best interest rate for ourselves and our businesses. The rates are always competitive and sometimes better than what you can get directly from the institution. And we can have a go and have a play. So if we're an individual with a financial advisor and we had, say, £1 million that we wanted to have in instant access, we can create a sample portfolio. And with that, it will give us the best interest rate for the first 120,000, the second best interest rate for the second 120,000. And we can see that the average here is a rate of 3.75% with 100% FSCS protection. And that's something for £1 million that isn't easy to achieve, but here it's done with a few clicks of a button. When making an application, you fill in your details. You need your national insurance number, your address, email address, and general proof of funds. It will normally take about a week for you to be approved, and then you can then deposit your cash. After the cash has been deposited in their general hub account, which is with Barclays, you can then allocate it to all the other accounts and go from there. And then you never have to move the money around. Lots of people use it for their personal savings, for longer term options, and also they do cash ISAs as well. With this,
Have you used
yeah.
it yourself, Chris?
Yeah, I use it myself, and I have clients that use it as well for their business accounts,
Yeah.
and they find it very handy. Like they can, for example, as they're saving throughout the year, they can just put the money aside for the tax, and every so often just drop a chunk of money in every month and build it up for the end of the year.
Yeah.
The fees are competitive, and if you have an advisor, instead of paying the headline rate of 0.25%, which is a clip on the interest that they take, as an advisor, you can reduce your fees to your clients to 0.20, or you could do a fee share option where you receive a fee for that instead.
So just to recap that there, so the advisor can earn a fee from this. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Or you do a fee discount for the client, and it's a simple. I can fill in the client's name, date of birth, email address, and send them the application. It'll take them 5 minutes. So it's just a really simple referral just to help them out. The way that I use it is, well, I don't really want to manage cash or build a portfolio of short-dated gilts or bonds or anything. So I just refer them to Insignis, let them have their own cash here. I think they'll find they'll get a better consistent return than premium bonds or other alternatives. So in their portfolio that I manage on platforms, great, I can put that in whatever I want. And then they've always got instant access and also savings accounts. And for those that want cash ISAs, it's here as well. It also easily helps with trust and trust bank accounts. I know there's only a couple of providers that you can use to set up and put the cash in there, like Carter and I think Metro Bank. But once you've got the money in those, you can then send it to Insignis and you get much better rates. So even for trust accounts, it can be fantastic.
Okay, just dive in there. Ken's got a question. If there's an advisor fee being paid on that 3.75 average rate, will that net down, or is that after the advisor fee? Do you know?
This would net down.
Okay, so it'd be 3.55 if there was a 0.2% advisor fee.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the headline rate before any fees are applied.
Yeah, it's the gross rate, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I ask a question, Mark? Sorry, Chris. Did you say you can set up a trust account directly, or you have to still use the Metro or the Caterer and then you can send it across? So I was listening,
Yeah.
but thing wasn't computing.
You use the Carter or Metro,
Okay.
and then send it here. Sometimes, if a solicitor's got the funds with them, the solicitor can send it directly without Cartel and Santander, but it can be a bit more tricky.
Have you used anybody else, Chris, like Flagstone or others?
No, I liked Insignis because Giles, one of the co-directors, is kind of Cambridge, ex-Cambridge. And I think these guys have been doing this longer than some of the alternatives that are out there.
Okay. Got any more to add, Chris, or is that pretty much it?
I think that's about it. That's all I have.
Yeah, you can't see on there who the different providers are, can you?
Once you log in, you can see there's like a quilter of best rates for personal, trust, business, etc.
Okay. Jack has made a point here which is relevant, in quite possibly correct. I can't verify this, but he's suggesting that in that period when the money goes onto the platform, before it's with the institution, it would not be protected by the FSCS protection limit. So there is a window of risk there. So if any of these cash hub platforms went down, there is a bit of risk there, I suppose. So just to be aware of that. I don't think that's avoidable in any sense. So yeah, just opening it up really to everybody here. Does anybody have any experience of other cash platforms like Flagstone? I personally use Quilter for my clients and myself. I found that quite easy. If you are using Quilter and clients are on the Quilter platform, when they're calculating the platform fee, they do take into account how much is sitting in Cash Hub. So if they've got that £1 million sitting in cash, that will reduce their investment fees. Say Craig's got your hand raised. Is that a previous question, Craig?
No, mate. You just asked if anyone else has done anything else. We've used Transact quite a few times. I've used them for trustee bank accounts. If you're having money paid out of a death case with a pension or life insurance, you can get it go straight to Transact. You haven't got quite the full protection that Chris was talking about. I think they split it between 7 accounts and you get about 400 grand's worth of protection. But the idea Neil Flint gave me a year or two ago was if you use it for corporate money, when you got your clients sat on too much money, because you're seeing the amount that you get paid a little bit, you can decide what you want to charge on an ongoing basis. And so we're just taking 0.25%. But the good thing that we found is then you know, when it comes to tax year end, they can't say that they haven't got any money to make their pension contributions and stuff. So having that oversight has been pretty cool for those who shy away from doing it. But yeah, the Transact process, as much as I don't like Transact generally as a platform for the cash accounts, it's been pretty good.
Yeah, I think one of the advantages clearly of using these cash platforms for us as advisors is it keeps us in contact with more of our clients' money. Historically, before we had these platforms, I think a lot of us probably said to clients, go and find an institution to save your money with. And we never really knew what was happening with that money, apart from when we came to an annual review and asked that question, what they've got. So if you're not doing it, I think it's a useful add-on, enhanced value for your client. Doesn't really cost you anything, but it will certainly stand you in a good position and help keep those clients locked in, because we're looking at lifetime value of clients, of course. And the longer we keep them, the more hopefully satisfied they are, and the more profit, shall we say, our businesses make, if we're allowed to say that in this day and age. So we've got roughly 10 minutes left. As Insignis have either not got the email or not got up, I don't know. A subject that is vexing me enormously, and Matt touched on it before, and that is what is going to go on with pensions next year. Just from what I can see, just opening up a little bit, I think our only options really are to encourage clients to spend the money, potentially to annuitize, again, to encourage them to spend the money, a life insurance. Anybody else got any interesting ideas how to mitigate this double or even triple taxation effect that IHT is going to have on surplus pension funds? I know Neil Flint wants to talk about this in Anaheim as a separate offshoot of the meeting, but it's a subject that's bothering me hugely at the moment. So if anybody wants to dive in with any thoughts about how they're going to approach this, Jack's got his hand up. I'm sure he's got something fantastically interesting to say.
What I'm doing is, sorry?
Go ahead, Jack.
Sorry. I have my own family charitable trust. I put money in, claim gift aid back, and distribute that money over the course of the year. And what I've been trying to do since the thing was announced was to take out more income than I need, which I have to pay tax on, but it's now out the pension fund and won't be subject to inheritance tax. And then I donate the net amount of that to my charitable trusts and claim the tax back. So if I take out 20,000, left with say basic rate tax 16,000, I put that 16,000 into my charitable trust and do a tax reclaim, and the trust gets the 4,000 tax back. So I've moved 20,000 from my pension, which won't be taxed. I've put it into the charitable trust and had the tax back. And because my trust is a charity, it won't be part of my estate. And I can give that away to charities that I choose, including MDRT Foundation.
Thank you, Jack. Nice little segue there. I'll ask the question just in case anybody else is thinking it but not brave enough to ask. How can I become a benefactor of your charitable trust, Jack?
Beneficiary. You have to be a registered charity, and you have to be carrying out stuff that I'm happy to support. So I support charities in different parts of the world, mostly local, and so the hospice and children's aid and old age care and things that I think need money, and I give that money out in various amounts over the course of a year.
We are fortunate to have you, Jack, within our community. Anybody else got anything to say about pension ideas?
Sorry, I can't find the hands up button. So, yeah, we're doing a lot of stuff at the moment where we are moving money out. We're telling people to spend money, but also I've got a lot of elderly clients that just have too much money. And so we've done the life assurance bit, but where families might be struggling, why not give some of the money to your children now on a regular basis? So we're moving 20% taxpayers at 40 at death to maybe putting that money with their family. And so the family's getting the benefit of that money now rather than later, less tax. We don't know where legislation's going, but we certainly have to start making those plans. And listening to the first speaker today, he's clearly focused on that area, which is a good thing to be involved in. And there's many presentations, Martin, that are being made by providers. So as and when we get information, I'll send it across to you as well to see if we can share ideas. Would you mind if I ask you one more question, which might make you all laugh? I've been approached by MDRT this morning. It's almost like the police raid, and they want me to prove my income for my qualification. Now, I'm a basic member of MDRT. I've sent the information because we're a network, so we don't deal with one provider, we deal with many. And my manager provided me with a statement, but it's almost like they just want to do a spot check. They say it's not personal, but we're doing spot checks. Has anyone else had anything to that nature?
No.
No. Maybe what I sent looked a bit like cartoon, really, because it was all in different colours. But what would you recommend I do? I've written back to her today, saying the only thing I can do is get you to write direct to open work, and I'm sure the manager will clarify my figures, because
I think that's probably the most appropriate thing to do, Paolo.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for your time on that.
Kevin,
you used to have to get
Sorry.
certificates from various providers. Early days of my MDRT membership, you used to have to get certification from your main providers to show what your commissions were at the time.
Paolo, I think they also accept accountants' letters as well, Paolo. I think I had to spot check a couple of years ago, and I just got my accountant to write something to prove the gross figure.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin, floor's yours.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of things. One, I'm fairly confident of. One, I'm trying to establish. But where someone's over 75 or not married, then I'm pretty sure taking full tax-free cash straight away at least gets it out of the income tax, if not IHT.
Yeah.
Second thing is that I had it confirmed, not from a technical specialist, but from our compliance network yesterday, that a donation to charity from your pension. So you know the rule where if you give 10% of your taxable estate to charity, you reduce your IHT rate. What I've been wondering, and what I've had confirmed from a source that I wouldn't want 100% rely on, but is pretty good, is that if you can make the full 10% donation out of your pension fund, so it gives away the highest tax portion of your estate and reduces the tax rate on your sort of non-income tax estate, if that makes sense.
That is
To be confirmed, but
the charitable donation of 10% of your taxable estate could be, yes, I think that could be given from part of your pension fund.
So yeah, what I mean is, if your estate's 4 million and your pension fund is 500,000, give your entire pension fund to charity, and then you get the 36% on.
Well, the rules about giving it to charity, I wanted to have, my nomination says to leave 50% of my pension fund to charity. But that's only permitted if you have no dependents, that's children under 23, and I've discovered that a spouse who is not financially dependent under pensions legislation is treated as being dependent, and therefore you can't give it from your pension fund. I can't, at my death, give it from my pension fund without it being an unauthorized payment and subject to, is it 55% tax, I think? So I have to leave my pension fund to my wife, and then she can make the distribution to charity at a later stage. But you could, if you've got pension cash and you want to.
I've not heard. Yeah, okay. I've not heard that. You might be ahead of me there.
This is clearly a really expansive subject that I think we all need to keep talking about. There's going to be lots of wrinkles and ideas. Anyway, we're heading up to the top of the hour. Somehow Chris and I have managed to fill half an hour for you guys there. kind of final note from me. I'm coming to the end of my term as the UK chair. I will be in Anaheim, but I will not be at the July meeting because I'm doing another daft sailing thing. I'm sailing across the Atlantic, so I'll be handing over to the rest of the committee to run the July meeting. Historically, we don't have a meeting in August because all of you are meant to be taking a month off, and then we'll pick it up again in September. I think I'm allowed to say who the incoming chair is. Is that correct? I'll share it anyway. Toby's going to be the new UK chair. I will be on hand with any help that he needs, speakers and behind the scenes stuff. Just so that all of you know that are not on committee or have never been on committee, there's a lot of work goes into being on the UK committee, putting on the events, either this type of event or the Future Vision event. Just please remember that these meetings don't happen by accident, and a lot of effort goes into them, even from people that you don't necessarily see. And especially important today because we've had a speaker not turn up. And given the level of professionalism that we do have in this room, it didn't make any difference to the quality of the meeting. And in fact, I'd like to think the last half an hour has probably been better than what Insignis would have delivered. Unfortunately, it is being recorded, so they might hear it.
Yeah, don't share it to them. Take them off the list.
Yeah.
Well,
Anyway,
well done to you. Well done to you, Martin, for all you've done.
Thank you, Jack. Let's call it a day there. It's 2 minutes to 9. Let's get to it and have a great day. And I hope the sun is shining where you guys are. And have a great weekend. See you all soon.
We had hailstones here yesterday. We had hailstones here.
Same here. Yeah.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.